Let's confuse the YouTube algorithm once again! Hi guys. As you may or may not know, I've been interested in one true crime case in particular for a while now. This is the Idaho Fort case. The purpose of this video and second or potentially third upcoming part is to organize the facts about the case and everything that's been confirmed, go back to the press conferences, go back to what was stated, and see what discrepancies we may find, what fits and what doesn't, and basically discuss that a little bit. There will be a little bit of speculation, naturally, but I will do my best not to spread any theories that may have originated online, because someone heard that someone said that someone wrote something they heard from someone at some point. There will be no discussions of Davids and Jacks and Kopackas and drugs and tunnels and the like. All of this is my opinion for entertainment purposes only. So for all those who don't know, what is the Idaho Fort case? On November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students' lives were taken at their home, 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. And according to the coroner, an edged weapon was used. They each had multiple stab wounds, but there was no sign of assault. The victims were Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan, both 22, and they were best friends and roommates who lived at 1122 King Road. They were both found upstairs in the bedroom on the 3rd floor together in one bed. On the 2nd floor were Xana Kernodle and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, who did not live at 1122 King Road but was staying over at his girlfriend's place. They were found together in Xana's room. The crime allegedly took place between 4 and 4:25 a.m. on November 13th. There were 2 other roommates at the house at the time of the crimes. They were both unharmed. It was initially presumed that the roommates were both on the 1st floor. The house had basically 3 floors. I'll put the picture here. But the roommate, DM, allegedly was not on the 1st floor, but rather in her bedroom on the 2nd floor of the house. Her room would have been directly under Maddie's room on the 3rd floor, where Kaylee and Maddie were found, and pretty much on the same floor as where Xana and Ethan's lives were taken. Now, we will talk about this a little bit more when we get to the affidavit, probably in part 2 of the series, but DM allegedly saw a man with bushy eyebrows, around 5'10", who was wearing a mask that was covering his mouth and nose. He walked past her, left her alone, just walked past her, through the kitchen and out the sliding back door, and that's how he left the house, allegedly. To understand more about that, we're going to review the timeline and how the events unfolded. According to the affidavit, at around 9 p.m. on November 12th, Xana and Ethan were at the party at the Sigma Chi house, which was Ethan's fraternity house, only a stone's throw away from the King Road residence. You could walk there in about 2 or 3 minutes. Meanwhile, Kaylee and Maddie were at the Corner Club, a local bar. They were there until around 1:30 a.m., at which point they walked a relatively short distance to a local food vendor called the Grub Truck. Here they were caught on camera because the Grub Truck was streaming on Twitch. They waited for their food and they left at around 1:51 a.m. They were driven home by a private party, and they reportedly returned to the King Road residence at around 1:56 a.m. Originally, the police stated that they were probably home by 1:45 a.m., but when the video from the Grub Truck emerged, it kind of shifted the timeline a little bit. So by the time Maddie and Kaylee returned, Ethan and Xana were allegedly already home, as were the other 2 roommates, DM and BF. These 2 had been out separately somewhere. So all 6 people were allegedly home by around 2 a.m. on November 13th. At around 3:29 a.m., a white sedan labeled suspect vehicle number 1 was spotted on camera, was caught on camera. They drove into the neighborhood and made in total about 4 passes. And we will look at this vehicle's path and the phone pings and all that, which you may or may not be familiar with, in part 2 when we look more closely at the suspect. At around 4 a.m., Zana received a DoorDash delivery. We don't know the identity of the DoorDasher. We know that the police allegedly spoke to this person and they cleared them, but we don't know who picked up the food, if it even was picked up, if it was Ethan or Zana. We don't know if the food was left in the front or at the back sliding door. Now, the surviving roommate, DM, was awoken at that time, at around 4 a.m., when she allegedly heard what she thought was Kaylee upstairs, in one of the bedrooms upstairs playing with her dog, Murphy. A short time later, she allegedly heard Kaylee say something along the lines of, "There's someone here." At this point, DM opened the door, but saw nothing. At 4:04 a.m., suspect vehicle number 1 is seen driving into the neighborhood for the 4th time. It appeared that it attempted to either unsuccessfully park or turn at the King Road residence. Zana's phone record apparently showed that she was on TikTok, or rather that her TikTok was active at 4:12 a.m. Now, at some point, DM opened the door for a second time. That's when she heard crying coming out from Zana's room. That's when she also heard a male voice say something along the lines of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Then at around 4:17 a.m., a security camera on the house next to the King Road residence picked up sounds, distorted sounds, of whimpering, a dog barking repeatedly, and then a loud thud. Now, DM opened the door for a 3rd time, and that's when she allegedly saw a man. He was wearing a mask that was covering his mouth and nose, was athletically built, around 5'10", and he had bushy eyebrows. DM stood, quote, in frozen shock phase as he walked past her and out the house through the sliding glass door. At around 4:20 a.m., the suspect vehicle number 1 is seen speeding away from the neighborhood. And then at 11:58, police receive the first 911 call. Now, I want to start dissecting this at the very beginning. So we're going to begin with the first police press conference that was held on November 17th, so just 4 days after the unalivings. As a linguist and someone who sometimes focuses a little bit too much on people's words, I did find something rather interesting about Chief Fry's language. And we will get to that, but first let's just start with some facts that the police present to the public.
We have learned that Ethan and Zana were at a party on campus, and Madison and Kaylee were at a downtown bar. They arrived home sometime after 1:45. We know that these homicides occurred in the early morning hours of Sunday, November 13th. Around noon, Moscow officers received a call of an unconscious person. Officers discovered the bodies inside the residence on King Road. The 4 were stabbed with a knife, but no weapon has been located at this time. There was no sign of forced entry into the residence. Autopsies are taking place today on all the victims, so we can continue to gather evidence and solve the crime. Based on details at the scene, we believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims. We're not 100% sure if the door was unlocked, but there was no damage to anything, and the door was still open when we got there.
Were the roommates home at the time of the attack?
There was other people home at that time, but we are not just focusing just on them, we're focusing on everybody that may be coming and going from that residence.
So the other 2 roommates were there at the time of the attack?
All the information that we have from our investigation is that yes, they were.
Okay.
Were the 2 other individuals present at the home when police responded at noon?
Yes.
Now, it has been speculated, though not confirmed, that this unconscious person may have been one of the roommates who fainted. I do find this plausible because it's hard to mistake a stabbing victim for an unconscious person. You know, you imagine that with a crime so horrific, it's pretty obvious that they're not just unconscious. But then again, it is also possible that there was a lot of confusion at the crime scene, and if the dispatcher really did talk to multiple people at the scene, perhaps it wasn't entirely clear what had happened and they couldn't 100% verify what was going on, so they put in unconscious person. And actually, we will get back to these other people in the house when we look at the November 23rd press conference. But as I said, I want us to focus on Chief Fry's language now, so I will show you a couple of following clips and I want you to listen carefully.
Investigators are working to follow up on all leads and to identify a person of interest. We do not have a suspect at this time, and that individual is still out there. What we do know, or what we don't know, excuse me, the identity and location of the suspect, or any clothing that was worn by the suspect. But like I've said, we do have a suspect out somewhere, and we are looking for that individual to solve this. There's still a person out there who committed 4 horrible, horrible crimes.
Notice how he uses singular repeatedly. It's not just once or twice, it's on several occasions. A person of interest, that individual. A person is out there who committed these crimes. Now, using singular might just be for the ease of communication, to be more brief and to the point, but it does stand out to me because at the same press conference, Colonel Wills uses phrases such as these.
To make sure that this comes to a conclusion and that the person or people that this is responsible are brought to justice. We want to do everything we can to make sure that this is done correctly and that the people that are responsible for this are brought to justice.
This makes me suspect that even 4 days after the crime, the police, the ones who were very much involved in the investigation, knew exactly that they were looking for one person and one person only. Now, of course, they were very likely looking for the man that DM described. Initially, we, the public, didn't have this information. This statement was released, like her statement, DM's statement, was released only after the suspect had been arrested, but the police, of course, knew, and I suspect they were looking for this individual who would fit DM's description. Notice also how Chief Fry instantly corrects the reporter who suggests that the surviving roommates were witnesses.
You have surviving witnesses to an incident at 3 or 4 in the morning and the 911 call didn't come until noon?
I don't think I ever said that they were witnesses. I said they were there.
And I can kind of understand that. At the time, no one had been arrested yet, and perhaps they wanted to protect the witnesses so that the perpetrator wouldn't know that somebody had seen him or her or them. And then also interesting is the fact that he says they believe it was an isolated, targeted attack and that they don't believe this could happen to anyone else.
We still believe it's a targeted attack. There is a threat out there still, possibly. We don't know. We don't believe it's going to be to anybody else. But we all have to be aware of our surroundings and make sure that we're watching out for each other.
This suggests to me that they probably found something that told them exactly why these 4 individuals, or one or some of them, were targeted and not someone else. Then again, maybe they were just trying to convince the public that everything is fine, that we should keep calm. You know, stay vigilant, but be calm. No one's gonna harm you. So, yeah. Now, the November 23rd press conference confirms a couple of things and gives us some new information too.
On the morning of November 13th at 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was placed. The call reported an unconscious person. The call originated from inside the residence, and the surviving roommate's cell phone was used. During that call, the dispatcher spoke to multiple people who were on scene. The results of autopsies indicated that the 4 were stabbed multiple times and were likely asleep during the attack. Some had defensive wounds, and there was no sign of sexual assault.
Here, it is confirmed that each of the victims had multiple stab wounds, which is potentially relevant piece of information in regards to the timeline, right? How long it took to commit the crimes. If all 4 people had multiple stab wounds, that tells you that the perpetrator probably needed a little bit more time. Now, remember, at 4:04, the suspect vehicle is allegedly still driving around, and it is suspected that it was just one person who did this, so they didn't have a driver, they were the driver, and they also committed the crime. So if at 4:04 they were still driving around, they still need to park somewhere, get out of the car, enter the house, go on 2 separate floors, attack 4 people, and then make their exit without any trace or leaving any of their DNA. In 13 minutes or so, I mean, it's not impossible, but it's a little bit unlikely. It does make one wonder, right? Now, as far as the victims' wounds go, I will talk more about that in part 2.
Do not believe the following individuals were involved. The 2 surviving roommates, the male seen in a grub truck video circulating on the internet, a private party who drove Kaylee and Madison home, any of the individuals who spoke to the dispatcher on the 911 call. We're also aware of a male whom Madison and Kaylee had called several times the morning of November 13th, and we do not suspect that individual.
Now, I also want you to look or listen to this following clip.
Why not tell the public who was targeted? If it was multiple people, it would go a long ways to telling the public what you're looking for.
Well, first and foremost, we have the integrity of the investigation to preserve. Releasing that to the public may or may not flood us with a lot of information that's not relevant or specific to what we're looking at. We've told the public very clearly from the beginning that we believe it was a targeted attack. I mean, to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point, because we're not going to release why we think that.
I've been racking my brain and trying to come up with a logical, clear reason as to why he would give this kind of answer. And the only thing that comes to mind is, again, that the police knew who it was or knew who they were looking for. Therefore, they didn't want people sending in more tips. But then again, if they already had the lead, even if they did receive more tips, they shouldn't throw them off, because if you receive something and you say, oh, that's irrelevant for the lead that we're following, you can just dismiss it. It shouldn't really bother you or throw you off, right? You can just ignore it if it's unrelated to what you're after. One would think that it's even more confusing if the public sends in all the random tips that are all over the place. Isn't that more baffling and confusing and potentially more, unrelated to the investigation? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But now let's change our focus to something where we can get a slightly clearer picture.
Well, we have looked at a lot of different vehicles. I'm assuming you're referring to the vehicles that were in the parking lot at the time. Yeah, so some of those vehicles belonged to the victims and some belonged to other people in the house. And so for us, that's part of the crime scene.
In regards to the vehicles in front of the house, we know the following. So the Range Rover was Kaylee's new car that she got only 2 days before her life was ended.
She just bought that Range Rover, and you guys must have been so proud.
2 days before.
The blue Honda was most likely Xana's car, as it can be seen in her TikTok. As for the white Chevy, I've not seen that confirmed anywhere, so we're just gonna put that one aside. And then we come to these other two vehicles, what I think have to be the Chapin vehicles. So Ethan's mom, Stacy, stated on Facebook that 2 of their vehicles were taken in as evidence. On Reddit, someone mentioned that she apparently also stated that the 2 boys, so Ethan and Hunter, shared a car while their sister Maisie had her own car. And I wanted to find confirmation of this, and lo and behold, I did. It was also on Stacy Chapin's Facebook. She does confirm that the boys shared the red Jeep, and Maisie would get her Ford Explorer. This post was made in 2018, so things could have changed since then, and by the time of the crime. But fact of the matter is, the Chapins owned a red Jeep and a Ford Explorer, and a Ford Explorer and a red Jeep are seen in front of the 1122 King Road residence at the morning of the crime. So make with that information what you will. Let's investigate this further. This here, what you're seeing now, is a virtual tour of the 1122 King Road house. So in the first picture, we see 4 vehicles in front of the house. One of those is a police car. The crime tape is also just around the house, not yet extended to the parking lot, as we can see in some other photos. In this picture, the red Jeep and the Ford are not yet in front of the house. If this image is indeed unaltered, as the creator of the 3D model claims, then this could mean that at the time of the crime, potentially only 3 cars were parked in front of the 1122 King Road house. And at least 2 of those cars belong to 2 out of 4 victims. If we presume that whoever committed these crimes knew who lived in the house, or perhaps knew the cars, then the perpetrator or perpetrators would technically have no indication that Ethan was also there, since he did not live in the house, and if his car was not there, the logical assumption is there's nothing to indicate that he would be there unless they saw him walk in. That's a whole other story then, right? But if the Jeep arrived with Hunter later and was not originally there, parked there by Ethan, then that's potentially relevant, I think. It could not mean anything, you know, whoever did this maybe was intent on going in there no matter what was parked outside. Of course, we have to note that since Kaylee's car was new, it was likely also unfamiliar to whoever did this, unless they specifically targeted Kaylee, in which case they would also probably know that she had a new car and what car it was and when she got there. It's all a little bit wobbly, like this isn't some solid theory, but it's food for thought, I think. One more thing I want to look at is the police press conference from December 30th, when they arrested Bryan Kohberger. This press conference I like to call, that's still part of the investigation and will come out later, because that was the response to 90% of the questions asked here.
Can you tell us what tip, what lead, what piece of evidence really led you all the way from Idaho to the suspect in Pennsylvania?
As I've said in the past, that's part of our investigation, and we won't be releasing that this time.
Soon into the investigation, did police and law enforcement begin to spot Mr. Kohberger as a potential suspect? How many tips, if you can say, were specifically related to Mr. Kohberger?
To the tip part, honestly, I can't answer that question, so I'm not even going to speculate on that. On the other part, that's part of our investigation, and it will come out.
Did CODIS initially return any hits on this guy?
That's still part of our investigation, and that will come out.
Have you identified a motive?
That's part of the investigation, and that will come out as we continue the investigation. But what we still ask is for people to continually send us things in the tip.
Any indication that the suspect knew the victims?
That's part of the investigation as well. It won't be something that will come out at this point in time.
You guys found the murder weapon or the Hyundai Elantra?
So we are still looking for all pieces of evidence. I will say that we have found an Elantra.
Can you tell us if you eventually had a license plate number to the Elantra and how you tracked it to Pullman?
That's still part of the investigation that will come out.
Look, I get that the police's hands are tied and that they can't reveal everything. I understand that. But then why take questions? Why not just give a statement if you know that you won't be able to answer questions? One thing that did stand out to me was this.
You mentioned earlier that you're still seeking tips about Bryan and that people should still share whatever information they have. Can you speak at all about what specifically people should be reaching out for, like if they know something?
I would say anything and everything. I would say anything and everything.
Anything and everything. You have the suspect, you arrested him, you clearly have something that led you to him. You will of course continue your investigation, yet you're still asking for the public to tell you anything and everything they may know about this person. Look, I'm not familiar with the system, so I can't say if this is standard procedure, but it seems a little bit off. You know you're probably going to get a bunch of unreliable and biased tips. You'll get people calling in who may have had personal beef with this guy, who just disliked him for whatever reason, and you'll get people who just want their 5 minutes of fame. Is this information not going to be
Not relevant or specific to what we're looking at.
You'll get people studying his photos and saying, oh, you can totally see he's the guy. It's in his eyes. It's the vibes. If you're investigating him, if you have him under the microscope, then why do you still need the public's opinion on this guy at this point? Listen, when I was catching up with this case back in the day, and I heard that a suspect had been arrested, I saw his face on the news, and I just thought, wow, great, they found him. That was rather quick. I'm curious to know, how was he connected to the victims? We're soon gonna get more answers, finally. Did he know them? Did he stalk them? Like, what was the connection? What was the motive? Yet, to this date, I don't think we have much more information than we did a year ago. I thought the pieces of the puzzle would slowly fall into place, but alas, everything but this seems to be happening. Everything is still hush-hush, everything is still sealed, no one is stalking, and only rumors and crazy theories are spreading around. Because, of course they are. If you're not telling the people anything, they're going to start inventing their own scenarios. So in part 2, we're going to go through the affidavit a little bit more, how the victims were found, we're going to look at their injuries a little bit, and we are also going to check the suspect vehicle. I think the survivors and the suspect are going to have to go into part 3. I have already started scripting part 2, and this just keeps expanding. It's like the Marvel universe. It never ends. But I really want to do a deep thorough deep dive into this, and we'll see how this goes. I hope you guys are enjoying this topic. As you know, always something random from this channel. Let me know if you are familiar with this case, if you have any guesses, any theories on what happened. Do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's not? And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I will see you next week in part 2 of this discussion. Let me know all your thoughts down below, and I will be seeing you soon.